Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dallas Live, and I am your host, Dr. RC. Today, the live show starts right now with Jon Snyder, who is crusading against America's pornographic epidemic. And why is the problem getting so worse? The number to call is 469 307 1642. John, welcome to the program.
Dr. Ravi, thanks so much for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here talking with you and talking with your listeners.
Excellent. I know we have listeners all over the world. Usually, this particular show is going to be relay broadcast at 8 p.m. Central Time and also throughout the next few days and few weeks. We have a serious problem in America, and I think you hit the nail right on the head, John. This is getting worse and worse, and apparently, it is swept under the carpet. Tell me, what is the real situation here?
Well, you're right, and I don't use the term epidemic very lightly, but I think in this case it's something that is actual and factual because not a lot of people think about the size of the porn industry in America. If you were to ask your average person, can you name the top 10 industries in the United States? I doubt that hardly anybody would think, oh yeah, I bet pornography and the sex industry is on that list. But the last stats that I heard, it's clocking in right around the seventh largest industry in the United States right now. So I mean, it's one of our primary industries as well as one of our primary exports or one of our primary sexports, if you will. So I mean, this is getting to an epidemic level, and it's taking its toll. It's not something to take lightly because it's taking its toll on families, it's taking its toll on our kids, it's taking its toll on individuals as well. So, yeah, I agree. This is getting to an epidemic level, and I don't think people quite realize how big of an issue it is becoming because of its treatment in the media and how it is being swept under the rug. So, thank you, Dr. Ravi, for tackling this on your show. It's a brave thing because it's a sensitive topic.
Well, there is one other serious problem that I noticed. If you listen to the late night talk shows, Jay Leno and so on and so forth,
Yeah.
they are not taking this seriously at all. As a matter of fact, there's a whole lot of jokes. Now, they have made this a mainstream event, and it actually legitimizes uh, pornography and people watching porn. And the jokes are, yeah, the jokes are fine, but the jokes are making them lighter. The jokes are
Yeah.
making them acceptable, and the jokes are making them also much easier for people to not to have any guilt feeling of watching porn on internet or anywhere else. Tell
Yeah.
me, what do you think about that?
I think that's really astute of you to notice because I remember thinking the same thing. I guess just for people to have a little background on me before I dive into that. I
Oh,
was
okay, yeah,
one of
that brings up an important point. By the way, I just wanted to get into this topic so much. Our audience would
yeah.
like to know, like to
I
know.
want to I do want to answer that question, but so people
Yeah,
have a
before
frame of
before we
reference.
go to that, once again, before we go to that,
Yeah.
tell us where
You
you
know.
were born and what were you doing when you were early part of your life, and what are you doing now, and what is in the future for you?
Oh well. Okay. Well, you know, I wrote the book, The Mighty Man Manual, because I was one of the casualties of this porn epidemic. I think I was exposed to it right around the age of 8 years old, which people might hear that and think, boy, that's young, but that's actually pretty much the national average these days of when our kids are seeing it for the first time.
Eight
And
years old?
8 years old, yep,
How did you
ages
get
8 to
hold of this
11.
stuff?
Yeah, ages 8 to 11 is when kids are seeing it now. Google has become the new sexual education for our country. Because kids, they'll hear a term on TV or they'll hear a term in a song or from their friends, and they don't want to ask their parents. They don't want their parents to freak out and say, "Where did you hear that?" And they don't want to ask their friends because they don't want to be seen as the little kid that doesn't know, isn't worldly wise, and so they dial it in on any of their devices that's web ready and Google, and they find a world of porn at their fingertips. When I was younger, it was a little different than that. It was still magazines and stuff back then,
That's correct, yeah.
but it still started me on a path that before I even realized it had turned into an addiction. And so, it was, and when I realized that it was an addiction and when I saw it starting to escalate, I just said, oh, I tried counseling and I tried, group sessions and I tried, all the books and all the ministries that are out there, and nothing was working for me. And I was crying out, and I just said, God, I got to get free from this. And that began a 3-year process. And the things that I learned during that time just so changed me radically that I wrote the Mighty Man Manual because I want to give real answers to people who are struggling, as well as to equip parents with the tools to instill into their kids so that they don't have the dispensation to this that I think so many of us do. But then going back to the societal issues, segue back into that. There's still that thing, like the Jay Lenos that are out there, like you were saying, that are just making so light of this. And you know, I agree. I remember seeing an episode of Friends a couple years back. I mean, I think it hasn't been on the air for a couple of years, but in that show they got a free hookup for porn, and they basically went on a week-long porn bender. And I remember thinking, boy, that's so irresponsible, because what if they had gotten heroin, and they went on a week-long heroin bender? People would be up in arms saying, what kind of a message are you sending with this show? But this is the media. They don't realize the dangers that are inherent to this and what it's doing to lives and families and kids and individuals. And so they're treating it so lightly without realizing that this is every bit as addictive as heroin, and it's ruining just as many, if not more, lives.
So that is pretty
Yeah.
much the reason that you wrote about the Mighty Man manual, even though this is a very sensitive topic. Now, I don't understand, everybody who is listening to this show or any other show, and every man, and perhaps even most women, cannot deny the fact that they looked at porn more than once, perhaps even daily. So, so this is unbelievable. But this has become such a closet scenario that no man or woman is saying that, well, they watch this every day. As a matter of fact, most of them do, and they don't want to talk about it. It's like it's like coming out of your closet. So they and some
Yeah.
of them do talk about it openly among themselves. That I have noticed.
Yeah. I mean, I think I heard a statistic recently that pornography searches make up about 60% of all internet searches. So yeah, you're right on the money. Even if people aren't aware or aren't admitting to it yet, people are looking this stuff up pretty much every single day, treating it like a casual thing.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, if any of the government officials or or a person of authority, okay, comes and tells the another party that you should not look at porn, and then the party who they are talking to has to simply say, well, the one who didn't sin, cast the first stone on me. In other words, nobody can cast any stone on anybody, especially when it comes to pornography.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, I think that's a really excellent point.
Okay, now the dangers of pornography. A lot of men feel that pornography is an acceptable outlet for their sexual urges. For example, if a man is not in a relationship, doesn't have a wife or a girlfriend or whatever the case may be, um, they say, well, let me take a look at this little online excitement and get on with it. So, do you disagree?
Yeah, I think the dangers are threefold. First, for families. Second for kids is collateral damage, but then thirdly for the individuals. Like you said, a lot of people they do feel like this is an acceptable outlet. Again, we haven't been careful. We haven't been um, realistic with the dangers. And when you start to really break down the statistics that are here, it's 318% more likely people are to have an affair if they're in a relationship, if they're looking at porn. It's just opening themselves up to a whole new world. It's a contributing factor in 68% of divorces. And that doesn't even begin to, as a counselor, I get the horror stories every single day from people that call into our ministry or they write to me and say, help. I just found my husband's pornography addiction, and so it's it's so damaging for, and I don't want to say that it's just men that are addicted. It goes both ways, but it's primarily men. I think it's about 20% of women are saying this is a
Really,
problem.
so
But
the
yeah,
statistics are a little bit
yep,
staggered against men, apparently. Now, there is another thing that I noticed. Even if you have a beautiful wife, okay, and
hmm
perfectly, good looking and everything else,
yeah,
and well disposed, and loves you, and you love her. Now,
yeah,
the problem is once you start looking at the porn, what happens is now you are looking at women who are probably, Hollywood type women. They will look absolutely perfect. Now, even now, your wife starting to look not so great. Is that the reason that these people went into divorce and everything else?
yeah. I don't know that I don't think that's necessarily the factor. I find personally that if you want to if you want to stay happily married and stay enraptured with the woman that you love, you focus on her, and meditate on her. And I'm sure we'll get into some of the chemical components of this later too. But yeah, we do see all these images, and we are stimulated by them in Hollywood. And I'm not sure necessarily that it's dissatisfaction that leads us to looking at these things. Personally, I find that it's a person's own deficiencies, not the deficiencies that exist in their relationship or whatever, that drive somebody to this. So, I would tend to think from my own experience and from dealing with and counseling people that it's not that they're dissatisfied with their wives or things like that. It's that they have a wound in their heart. You know, People don't have a porn problem. I think they have a love problem, and they're looking to get that. They're medicating that heart issue in every way possible. But then what happens is it does lead to dissatisfaction, and we can talk about that a little later if you like, from the chemical component and what actually takes place in the brain. But yeah, I think that really it's you know we're responding poorly to the stimulation that's out there. And I'm not sure that most men even unpack it that much. That they say, "Oh, I'm dissatisfied," yada yada. Really, I think we're more creatures of habit. We see the ad or the magazine cover, and we say, "Wow," the receptors go open, and right then we start on a slippery slope that eventually leads us to a bad spot if we're not in the driver's seat of our sex drives.
I see. Okay, so it's pretty much addictive then. It's like a drug. What is so addictive about this? How do you compare this against a drug or alcohol or smoking?
Yeah, well, the thing about pornography is that the addiction takes place on two levels. There's a chemical level, and then there's the emotional level. From the chemical level, there's your brain is putting out things when during sex and sexuality that are very powerful, and people don't realize what all is taking place. Dopamine is being released. I,
Yes.
I know. I know you have a history in some pharmaceutical science, so you know the effects that these things can have. There's also what's called endogenous opiates. People
Yes.
recognize the term opiate from opium.
Uh-huh.
Those are being released during sexual activity, and usually when people are looking at pornography, they're doing it for an extended period of time. Your average, you know, even though we like to think that we're going to have these long romantic evenings, your average session of lovemaking is less than 10 minutes long statistically in America. But people who are looking at porn, they do so for hours. So these chemicals are released into the brain, and then you get another a compound effect. In addition to the opiates and the dopamine that's released, you get norepinephrine, oxytocin, vasopressin. These are your bonding chemicals that are literally burning these images into our mind. And I think everybody's probably heard and joked about, men have, so many sexual thoughts every day and things like that. Well, people that are looking at porn, this gets worse. That problem gets worse because the body also produces more testosterone. But these, the oxytocin and the vasopressin, they're literally creating kind of ruts in the brain that are making us think about these things, and these images are coming back to haunt us on a regular basis. So the physical component of this is very addictive. It's the combination of the increased testosterone, these bonding agents, and then the euphoric high that you get from the chemical release makes it very physically addicting. But there's also the emotional component as well, and we can talk about that a little bit if you like.
Something you brought up very interesting. We have come to the first segment, closure of the first segment, the part 104. Um, you said that the sexual intercourse that takes place between men and women lasts about 10 minutes, but the men are able to sustain themselves on pornography for hours. I'm sure that this is a shocking information for all the women out there. They wish their men can be with them for hours instead of quickly finishing it off in a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Dallas Live, and I am your host, Dr. RC. We are talking to Jon Snyder about the America's porn epidemic, why the problem is getting worse. The number to call is 469-307-1642, and we will be right back.